Moment to try to gather myself, but here we go. Connell, thank you.
Have a good show.
All right. Thanks, buddy. I'll catch you tomorrow. All right. So, tariffs dropping, markets spiking, policy changing. So, did we just witness the art of the deal, or did the president back down?
I saw last night where people were getting a little queasy. It wasn't sustainable what was happening. Somebody had to pull the trigger. I was willing to pull the trigger. This should have been done long ago.
Tonight, the major move just 1 week after so-called Liberation Day. A 90-day pause on the steepest of worldwide tariffs. 10%, though, remain across the board. But then there's China. That trade war in full effect tonight. President Trump announcing 125% tariffs after China retaliates. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on News Nation. Tonight, we're also taking you live to the Southwest. Why Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in New Mexico and what he is telling News Nation about some of the food in your pantry. Plus, a live look at Capitol Hill, the fate of tax cuts. Now in the hands of the House, a big vote is expected this hour on the president's one big beautiful bill, as he calls it. But first tonight, hear from the Hill why the president hit the pause button. Mick Mulvaney, Trump's former chief of staff, tells us what he's hearing and what you should expect to happen next. Joe Khalil on the fallout from the Hill. But we begin tonight with our Robert Sherman, live tonight at the White House, where the president, Robert, revealed this afternoon that he might have come to this decision just this morning.
Yeah, he certainly did, Blake, as you saw this upswing in the market today coming after the president handed down new guidance on his tariff policies. On the one hand, China announced new retaliatory tariffs this morning. The president said tariffs for China are going up again to 125%, the second major increase that we've seen in the last 24 hours. But on the other hand, for countries that chose not to retaliate, reprieve, reductions to 10% tariffs, and a 90-day pause on added retaliatory tariffs across the board. But despite the ups and downs, the president telling the nation to keep calm now says he's feeling good about the current landscape. Take a listen.
Our country's stronger than it's ever been, and somebody had to do that. We had to take the medicine. We had to go through the operation, and that's what we've been through, and a lot of presidents would not have done it.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying he'll be taking point on negotiations with 75 or so countries that have lined up to cut a deal. Since that Rose Garden announcement last week, his message to them has been, be patient, don't retaliate, and let the chips fall.
President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating and escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
The president still remaining confident a deal will come together with China once the dust settles. Blake?
Our Robert Sherman live tonight at the White House. Robert, thank you. All right, so that big announcement from the president today sent stocks skyrocketing. The Dow jumping nearly 3,000 points, almost up 8%. The Nasdaq up about 12%. Would you look at that? And the S&P 500 up nearly 10% today. The Dow, the Nasdaq, the S&P 500, all with their biggest one-day point gains ever. Now, for some Republicans in this town, you could say it was a bit of relief. They had been questioned for days now about, essentially, if they're the party of tariffs. Or Joe Khalil has been catching up with some lawmakers on both sides of the aisle with a whole lot of reaction today to this one. Joe?
Yeah, Blake, and you're absolutely right. Republicans who have been in President Trump's corner and have defended him on these tariffs today were very relieved. They said this is, in their view, evidence that the president's strategy was working, and maybe that there are trading partners that are willing to come back to the table. President Trump's critics, Democrats, and you include some Republicans like Senator Rand Paul in that category, however, say it's not good enough, and they say that this back and forth is chaotic and actually in the long run may do some damage in terms of our global trust. Take a listen to, again, some of the critics and their voices today.
Tariffs are not going to be successful if they're on one day and they're off the next day, and then they're on and they're imposed at random. And now we have, I guess, 90 days of further uncertainty, 90 more days in which businesses can't plan. They don't know, are they coming back or they're not coming back?
It's a clear indication that it's not just me that thinks the tariffs are bad for the economy.
Now, Blake, you started off by mentioning that it appears maybe this plan just went into the works this morning. We got some indications that that may be the case as well today. President Trump's trade representative, Jameson Greer, was literally testifying on the Hill when this news broke. He appeared to learn about it in real time, as did the Deputy Treasury Secretary, who was also in the room today briefing lawmakers when the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, was called off last minute. Now we know why.
Now we know why is certainly one way to put it. Our Joe Kaye, live tonight in the Capitol hallways. Joe, thank you. All right, so a reminder here for a second. Let's take a breath. A reminder, while it has been a long one, it's only been one full week since the president stood in the Rose Garden for Liberation Day, as he called it, and when he sent a tweet this afternoon declaring a pause, or a social media post. Now, here's just some of what has happened in that 1 week's time span. I'll start with the S&P 500. That, of course, is a broad look at some of the biggest companies in this country. It was down about 11% from the opening of the markets on Thursday after the announcement to right here, right? And then the president sent his post today, and you can see how it gave a massive and sustained move just up and to the right throughout the day, timed basically to the second from when the president made that announcement. But beyond the markets, other key indicators were also flashing massive warning signs. For example, prices for a barrel of crude oil dropped from about $66 to $57. That's important because it was basically saying, you know what, there could be weaker economic demand. And the bond market was screaming. Yield spiking, which, by the way, drives up mortgage rates. It's not a one-for-one, but it is a good indicator. President Trump even revealing today he was watching the bond market last night. And when asked about the pause, the president acknowledged that he felt the sense of fear.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know. They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
But the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, painted a little bit of a different picture today, suggesting that this was all part of a big plan that brought countries to the table and exposed China.
He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along. And that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors.
So was this all a reaction to worry, sentiment, market moves, or was this the art of the deal? And what happens over the next 90 days or so? This man would know a thing or two. Mick Mulvaney was the one who told us we should listen to Wall Street for a possible move and who we should be listening to inside the White House. Hello, sir. Mick, of course, the former Trump White House Chief of Staff, News Nation contributor.
Hello, Berman. It's always nice to get it right every once in a while.
Every now and again.
I'm wrong so much. It's nice to be right every now and then.
Art of the deal? Or was he watching Wall Street and the bond market and said, wait a minute here?
A little bit of both. I mean, that's what he's really good at. You heard Scott Bessent use a word that I don't think gets enough play when it comes to referring to Donald Trump. Leverage. Donald Trump is the best I've ever seen at creating leverage where none exists. He took what was objectively a bad situation in the stock market, and I think today was able to turn it to his advantage.
But it was his situation, right?
Yeah,
like he started it, he created it.
That's correct.
So was this, I guess, Mick, was this the big plan? Or not,
and that's where I pause because
no pun intended.
Yeah, if this, good point. If this was the plan from the very beginning, then they have a problem, and the problem is credibility.
Okay.
Because Scott Bessent has been out telling us for the last couple of days that this was not going to happen, that these were here, et cetera. We might be doing deals and so, but no one ever said that we were considering a pause. And so now you've got a situation where unless they handle it correctly, other nations are going to say, you know what, I don't want to talk to Scott Bessent. I want to talk to President Trump. Just as importantly, and I think more critically, the people in that building across the street are going to say, you know what, we want to talk to Trump because only Trump speaks for Trump, and we're not really sure we trust anybody else to deliver his message.
To your point, the White House, just as recent as yesterday, was saying, no, there is not going to be a delay, not going to happen, right? And so President Trump today was asked inside the Oval Office about that, about this sort of shift in tone and basically if he pulled the rug from underneath his own staff. Here was the president. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Well, a lot of times it's not a negotiation until it is. And that happens. And, I said outside that you have to have flexibility to do it right. And that's what we have. We brought everybody to the table. And it may not be a negotiation. It may not last.
A lot of times it is not a negotiation until it is.
If you can make sense of it, you're better than I am.
You're the former chief.
Exactly. Look, they're in a circumstance. Look, they made the best of a bad situation. Okay? And now they've got a chance to isolate China. Besant's absolutely correct that China has now been exposed for what it is, which is a bad actor. This would be a great opportunity for them to do what we talked about doing during Trump 1.0, which is try and rally the whole world against China when it comes to trade.
So you were the chief in the first trade war, right, with China in 2018?
No, I was the OMB director at that time.
Okay.
But was very familiar with it.
You had a first row seat of this, yeah. Let's talk about China.
Yeah.
Because we saw this movie in 2018 and 2019.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So what happens here with China, Mick, and the administration and Trump and Xi Jinping?
Look, I think what the White House has figured out is that, the American people are willing to go along. They really are. They want to do something about China, and they will go through a little bit of difficulty in their own lives to level the playing field with China. But picking a fight with the whole world at once and seeing the 401ks tank like they did with the specter of inflation, that was just a little bit too much. So maybe Trump has found the sweet spot here and says, you know what? We'll take the 90 days, we'll do what we can with the rest of the world, but I'm going to focus on China because that's where the public wants me to do. And what's the one bipartisan thing in this town? Opposition to China.
Opposition to China. I do want to point out, though, that trade war with China was basically all of 2018 and most of 2019. So it's not a realistic expectation, is it, Mick, to think that in 70 days, 90 days, whatever, there's going to be some big, massive trade deal.
Yeah, but I don't really think they want a big trade deal with China.
You don't think?
No, I think there's geopolitical reasons to try and limit China. They're on the phone with the Japanese or the Australians or even the British. They're saying, look, help us fix China because it's going to be a problem.
The message coming out of the White House, and I want to leave you with this, is be cool. They actually posted.
It's easy for you, Berman.
Well, it's easy. It's easy to say. Here was the president, and here's why I want to ask Mick.
But it does take guts. It even takes guts for our country to go through it. That's why I say be cool. They were saying just be cool. It's going to work out. It's going to work out, and it's working out.
Yeah. You can laugh about it, right? Be cool, the message and all that. But the reality is, this, I know this. There were businesses over the last week that were trying to figure out what are their contingency plans, where do they go next, small, medium, large. And the reason why I ask you, Mick, is how long can that be the message? Just be cool when they went through this whole exercise and they don't know what comes next.
Keep in mind, I think one of the things we're forgetting about is the other things that Trump wants to be doing in the meantime. He wants to get his deregulatory agenda sort of up and running. He wants to get this tax bill moving. He made some progress on that today. And I think the longer he can sort of delay this fight, the other tools he brings to bear to help folks back home. You might be willing to pay a little bit more for stuff if you got a little bit of a tax break or if DREG is making stuff a little bit cheaper.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mick Mulvaney, see you later in the show.
I'll be here.
Thank you, sir. All right, still to come tonight here on The Hill. Another big headline in Washington today. Mick was just referencing some of it, the president's agenda on taxes. But are some within the president's own party about to jeopardize what he calls the big, beautiful bill? Plus, there's this.
My biggest priority is to make sure that there's good food on the reservation, that they can get away from this dependence on processed food, which is poison.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. visiting New Mexico, pushing to ban chips, soda, candy from food stamps. So how's this being received? We are live from the land of enchantment, and it's known as the granddaddy of them all. We're talking about the Masters tournament. Is it the only place that's not impacted by tariffs? We'll explain. Welcome to Washington. This is the center of politics, especially on a day like today. I'm Blake Berman. You're watching The Hill, and we're back here in 4 minutes.
I'm Ashley Banfield, and you're listening to News Nation, news for all America. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com.
My biggest priority is to make sure that there's good food on the reservation, that they can get away from this dependence on processed food, which is poison, and particularly disproportionately poisons.
That, of course, the Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in New Mexico today on his Make America Healthy Again tour. The secretary addressing Native Americans' dependence on SNAP benefits, better known as food stamps. Now, out of all 50 states, it is New Mexico which has the highest percentage of people on the SNAP program. The secretary is now leading a charge to ban junk food in the SNAP program. Our Marcus Espinosa, once again, alongside Secretary Kennedy tonight in Gallup, New Mexico. Marcus?
Hey, Blake, good evening. Yeah, this has been a mission for RFK Jr. from the very beginning. Before he even took this position, he is really thinking this is the perfect and proper time to go after the SNAP program and try to offer some reformations.
Sugary sodas, salty chips, carb-laden candy. They're all in the crosshairs of a push to ban food stamp recipients from using their benefits on junk food.
We are reforming the SNAP program so that we're not poisoning kids. 10% of SNAP is now spent on soda drinks, which are giving diabetes to children.
Measures making their way through the U.S. House and Senate not only ban soda, but candy, ice cream, and prepared desserts. A proposal by Republican Senator Rand Paul, a doctor, limits beverages to water, cow's milk, almond, soy, and coconut milk, or 100% fruit juice.
And we are starting kids addicted to these sugar drinks when they're very young in poor communities. We're getting rid of that.
So far, at least 11 states are following suit. Iowa's plan is the strictest, only letting benefits pay for a list of whole foods.
Eggs, meat, dairy, bread, grains, fruit, vegetables, cereal, peanut butter, nuts, pasta, rice, legumes, and any food on the WIC-approved food list. I don't have time to list all the foods that this bill would ban, but it's effectively 2/3 of the grocery store.
The governor of Kansas last week vetoed a new law that would limit SNAP purchases. The Democrat joins Walmart in opposition. The grocery store giant that gets 25% of all SNAP dollars nationally registered against a proposed food stamp ban in Texas. Americans divided about federally funded benefits being used on highly processed food.
I've been on food stamps before. We shouldn't limit the things that they're accessible to, because normally sugary, not good food is normally the cheapest. So it would be better if we just made healthier food cheaper, but unfortunately that's not the world we live in.
I think there should be some kind of guidance about only being allowed to buy like nutritional foods that are going to keep them healthy and fit.
Yeah, I was on EBT for years of my life, for a long time, and I think there are things that could be not on there, like energy drinks, stuff that really isn't good for your health.
Everybody needs a sweet treat now or then, even poor people.
So, Blake, New Mexico has about 21% of the population here on SNAP, so it is certainly a large portion of that population. And then also Idaho is poised to be the first state to ask for regulations from the federal government on the SNAP program here. But certainly this is a hot button topic. A lot of opinions on this one, Blake.
All right, our Marcus Espinosa live tonight in what looks like a beautiful day out there in Gallup, New Mexico. Marcus, thank you. Still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill, including the big debate over the president's so-called big, beautiful bill. Could it actually have some big trouble in the House? There is a vote that is expected to take place any moment now on the president's campaign promises. We will take you live to the Hill once that happens, plus the president makes another big move. So what does the American public think about his plans? Look who's here with me, Chris Stirewalt. What a day, man. I mean, like...
Ride the lightning, brother. Ride the lightning.
Ride
That's
the
all you can do.
So you've got some new numbers out, which basically explains where the public is right now. And the president was probably watching.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When the arrows are down on the polls, it's just as bad as when they're down on the market.
Stirewalt on what he's seeing. Other side of the break when the Hill returns.
You're listening to The Hill on News Nation's audio stream. Available 24/7 on the News Nation app. Or just say, Alexa, play News Nation.
Welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. Just about 6:30 here in Washington. Your money in the middle of some of the biggest debates and talks in this town tonight. President Trump's 90-day pause on several countries dropped 10% across the board is now the policy for every country except for China, who the president is hitting with a 125% tariff. Now, the move's drawing reaction and a sigh of relief from members of his own party.
I was very worried about how this was going to affect their businesses, their outcome, my constituency in general. But then everybody came to the table.
I'm not the world's biggest fan of tariffs, high tariffs as a permanent part of the economic landscape. I'm not opposed at all to using tariffs as a negotiating tool. Seems like that's what the White House is doing.
He's making good on a campaign promise to shake things up, to reorder the world system.
Now, just down the road from the White House, a live look at the House floor right now, where lawmakers are now gearing up for a vote. I think we're probably minutes away, it looks like. Gearing up on a vote for the budget blueprint endorsed by President Trump. Now, this would then clear the way for the president to eventually get what he calls the one big beautiful bill on tax cuts and other legislative priorities at some point later in the year, maybe in the upcoming few months. President Trump is pressing Congress to move ahead.
We had a great meeting today. I think we are there. But just in case there are a couple of Republicans out there, you just got to get there. Close your eyes and get there. It's a phenomenal bill. Stop grandstanding. Just stop grandstanding.
But tonight, there is some opposition within the Republican Party on that budget blueprint, which is why we are watching this vote so closely here on the Hill. We are also exactly 1 week removed from President Trump's announcement on sweeping tariffs in the White House Rose Garden, the so-called Liberation Day, right? A cornerstone of his economic agenda. And while today's temporary pause on tariffs for every country except China is a sign that he will use them as a tool for negotiating, we're starting to get a sense of what the White House is also up against when it comes to public opinion. A poll released today by Quinnipiac University highlights Americans' thoughts on the new Trump economy. Chris Steyerwalt is here with me to break it all down. Chris, the polling came here before the president's announcement, but after so-called Liberation Day, right? So it really gives us a sense of where the public, I guess, what was heading into today.
Yeah, ungood, I think, is the term. Show us the first element, U.S. economy on tariffs. Okay, so you see, how will Trump's tariffs impact the U.S. economy?
Yep.
Should say effect, but people are afraid of the E and the A, and they use the wrong word. I hate impact. Short term, is it going to help? 22% say yes, 72% say it's going to hurt. But look at that. Almost half of Republicans are so committed.
Yep.
They're like, it's just going to help. And then it goes up. You look over here among Republicans, 87% say in the long term it's going to help. Now, we know this is true that if it had been Joe Biden and you'd have flipped it around with a different thing, you'd just flip all those numbers.
Yep, exactly.
Here's what matters. Among independents, what's making these numbers, as my youngest man child would say, why are these numbers buns? Why are these straight buns?
Right.
And the answer is independents hate tariffs. They hate them. They don't want them. They're concerned about them.
Okay.
And when you have this much uncertainty churning around, these majority makers, the deciders in all of these elections, should go ahead and move us to element 3. This is the overall U.S. economy, sentiment about the overall U.S. economy. Okay, this is that same Quinnipiac poll. Do you approve or disapprove of Trump on the economy overall? Just 40% approve. On trade, just 39% approve. What does that tell us? What was for a long time Donald Trump's strongest suit has become a weak point for him. This doesn't matter to Republicans yet.
Right.
Those folks in Congress, if he made a tower out of mashed potatoes and called it art, they would all say, "Oh, it's the most amazing art I've ever seen." But voters are souring on this, and they have a short attention.
And by the way, I would note, all of this is happening, and those are all negative, right? Those are all underwater there, essentially, on the economy, Chris. All of that is happening when we saw the stock market selling off, the bond market screaming, and the president making a decision today saying, you know what? We're going to hit the pause button on tariffs. Full panel here.
You move around a lot on the weekdays. On the Sunday, we try to keep it a little more stationary.
I got to get my steps in. Full panel with me now. Mick Mulvaney, News Nation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Jasmine Wright, national political reporter for the digital news outlet Notice. You know Chris.
Still here.
Still present. Dan Cannonen is the former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Thanks for being here, all. Nice to have you all in. The backdrop there is sort of what you had been highlighting, Dan, which was this is the biggest moment of political capital for President Trump, and that's sort of the swimming upstream part here.
Well, I'll take that point and pair it with something Mick has said a couple times, which is the bigger you go on your policy, on your early administration first 100 days, and President Trump has obviously tried to go as big as can be in a bunch of different ways, things I disagree with greatly, of course, right? But they're large. Right. It's aggressive. But when you're at your highest political capital and you take these big swings, and the stock market's one thing, but the bond market, the very plumbing of our economy, if that goes, the whole house floods. He's going to own the results of this, not just the sentiment on the policy, but the results on higher prices, lower jobs. If we do dip into recession, this will be Trump's recession.
Show me the live picture of the House right now, if we can, because there is a vote that is expected to take place any moment now, really, in the upcoming minutes. And why is it important? Well, this, Mick Mulvaney, as you know, is basically the passageway for Republicans to do all of the campaign promises: no tax on overtime, no tax on tip, no tax on Social Security, extend the tax cuts, on down the list. There's a lot of conservative Republicans who have issues with spending, and that's sort of the rub here.
So here's where we are in the process. This is the motion to recommit. There's typically 3 votes. There'll be a vote on the rule, which has to go first and did go first, and the Republicans won that 216 to 215, the closest of margins. Right. Then you have the motion to recommit, which is the minority party's motion to
skip to the good stuff.
And then you have the vote on the bill. So the question is, do the 216 people who voted for the rule also vote for the bill? If they do, it passes. Typically, that's the case, but nothing's typical in Washington, D.C. anymore. So there may be, if there's one more Republican out there who said, you know what, I'll vote for the bill so we can get to the final vote, but I'm not voting for the final bill, or somebody mysteriously just goes to dinner, then the outcome could be different.
And the president last night, Jasmine, basically told Republicans, stop grandstanding. Yeah. But they have their own districts and constituencies and their own races that they'll have to run next November.
Yeah, I was at that NRCC dinner last night as Pool, and I can tell you that was consistent with President Trump's message for the last 2 months, which is basically to Republicans, grin and bear it. Go along with what I am asking you to do, and I will reward you down the line. But I think this time, kind of similar to what we saw over the Christmas break when they basically did not raise the debt ceiling, despite Trump saying, raise the debt ceiling for me before I get into office. I think you're starting to see more and more people say there are not enough cuts in this Senate bill to make me comfortable with voting in a way that you didn't see a month ago. So I will be really interested to see how long really Trump spends on the phone this afternoon trying to kind of twist arms and get people to vote for him.
The House undertook an extraordinarily painful vote on the first round of this. It will cost them seats. They voted for what amounted to cuts to Medicaid, voted for cuts to popular programs. They did the responsible and unpopular thing, which is they produced a budget that was fiscally sane. Maybe not humane in the eyes of Democrats, but it was fiscally sane. So then those dummies, they send it over to the Senate, and the Senate says, no. Right. We're just going to increase the debt by $6 trillion. We're not going to do any of that cutting stuff. Right. And they ping-pong it back to the House. Now, a bunch of the people who voted for it the first time and who voted for that rule that Mick was talking about, they are absolutely frosted that they took the hard vote, sent it to the Senate, and the Senate was like, no, we're just going to obliterate everybody's future with this massive debt bomb.
I don't think much is coincidental in Washington, but is it coincidental that Trump yanked the tariffs? No. Put the tariffs on pause today, hours before, again, show me the live picture of the House, hours before these Republicans are about to vote on his so-called...
And by the way, we should point out, what if the bond market continued to do what the bond market can do? And you can picture the Treasury Secretary coming to the president with a printout of the 10-year Treasury yield and saying, if bonds continue to do this, the U.S. cost of borrowing and this debt bomb that the Senate has just approved, if that goes into effect, then everything becomes even more affordable because the price of borrowing money goes through the roof.
On your point, Chris, just what they've gone through in the House, they've had to vote for $500 billion in Medicaid cuts. They've now had this debt saddled on them if this happens on the policy baseline concern here. There is the tariff and a huge sales tax there, and they have this chaotic situation with the bond market. They've gone through political hell, frankly, in just the first 70-some days of
now,
this administration.
they would say, just to jump in real quick, they would say, we actually haven't voted on anything yet specific.
It's only a blueprint.
It's only a blueprint.
I'm sure that when Dan was cutting ads, say, guys, that's not fair. It was just a blueprint.
It's just a procedural vote. No, that doesn't.
Hang around. Other side of the break, we're going to continue to keep our eyes what's going on up on the Hill. The art of the deal, though, was it that? I don't know. We'll see. But here was the president explaining it today.
We had to take the medicine. We had to go through the operation, and that's what we've been through. And a lot of presidents would not have done it.
So was this the plan all along, or did the president see what was going on and essentially cave? Full panel returns, and the Masters. Thank goodness. Tees off tomorrow.
Hello, Fred.
But why this might actually be the one place, or one of the very few places, that you can't really get hit with tariffs. We'll explain. Stay with us.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
Number one, you're a cheap frump.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
You have a tie on that goes with nothing else.
Tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on News Nation.
Thanks for listening to News Nation on the go. I'm Senior National Correspondent Brian Entin. We're here for you 24/7 on the News Nation app or on your Alexa. Just say, play News Nation.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal.
That, of course, President Trump at the National Republican Congressional Committee last night, seeming to suggest that he has scores of world leaders eating out of the palm of his hand. Today, he hit a planetary-sized pause button on tariffs, freezing them, or at least bringing most of them down for 90 days against all of our trading partners except one. The president increasing tariffs on China to 125%. And if you listen to the administration, this was just the latest chapter, they say, in the art of the deal.
China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it.
I'm not calling it a trade war, but I'm saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that.
But on the other side, the narrative is the president caved. For example, right after the president announced a pause on most tariffs, the minority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, reacted saying, quote, Trump retreats on tariffs because of Trump slump. Now, if you think this is the strategy by the Trump administration, that it's been a team effort, I want you to look at one moment today from earlier up on Capitol Hill. This is the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. So basically the person who's at the top of the totem pole for trade with the administration. Testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee.
Was made a few minutes
ago. And he was asked
sitting here under discussion
by Representative Stephen
So the trade representative hasn't spoken to the President of the United States about a global reordering of trade.
Yes, I have. I've just been in the hearing with you.
But yet he announced it on a tweet. WTF?
Seemed like there that the trade representative found out about the pause, potentially. We don't know, but it seemed like it there. They found out at the very same time that basically the rest of us did. Full panel here, back with me now. Mick, you know this administration inside and out. When you put all of this together, your read tonight is?
That the president pivoted. And this was not the strategy from the beginning. He just did exactly what he said. He will tell you the truth. He looked at the bond market, got a little bit worried about that, saw the Jamie Dimon interview this morning, and said, you know what, I'm going to put this on pause for 90 days. I do not believe for a second this was the plan from the very beginning. But if it was, then it was the plan only in one person's mind. And that was Donald Trump. And he didn't tell any of the rest of the team what the plan was, because you can't do that to Jamieson Greer, and hang him out to dry like that.
So on that note, Jasmine, you were first question yesterday in the White House press briefing.
Yep.
Play the question that Jasmine asked Caroline Levitt. Watch.
Thanks so much, Caroline. A couple questions for you. The first one being, can you explain the White House's evolution from this is not a negotiation on tariffs to countries should pitch us and start negotiations on tariffs?
Sure. As the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time.
Oh, you just had the former chief whispering in the middle of that.
We love it. We love it.
It's a It's a question we asked on the show last night.
Yeah.
What's the plan?
And I think still they haven't really been able to say it. Even yesterday, she said that I reject you using the term evolution. She said later on to a different reporter that there will be no delay or extension. Here we are right
Certainly
now, less than 24.
90 days, she said.
Certainly.
Definitely.
Absolutely not 90 days. 24 hours later, it's a complete 180. And so I think that this is the White House, really, we saw them today kind of scrambling in real time. Trump makes a decision today, an administration official told me. He wrote that tweet. He said he wrote it from the heart. He wrote that Truth Social, excuse me. He wrote that Truth Social, and then they basically blasted out into the world. And then I was at the White House today, and you're basically seeing the administration aides scramble to try to get Bessent in front of reporters to explain it away. Doesn't necessarily do the best job. We still don't understand. He says that it was a plan all along. Trump then goes back and says, actually, I was looking at the bond market. So it really is here and there. And ultimately, what we don't have is a final conclusion as to what the plan is and what these deals could look like after 90 days.
If Mick tells you that this was a pivot, as a Democrat, are you willing to accept that?
A pivot is a nice way to put it, for sure. I mean,
well, that's why I picked up on that word.
He absolutely caved. The bond market, which is, again, the plumbing of our economy, if it goes, the house floods. That's a huge problem for him. The stock market's another problem for him. He's got the big, beautiful bill he's trying to get passed, and he's losing credibility with the caucus. As Mick pointed out, there's challenges they're getting the votes. But at the end of the day, to Jasmine's point on the plan, I think that's the biggest challenge here. There is no strategy to rehome manufacturing in this country. There's no economic agenda. There's just Trump doing jazz. And if you want business investment, you don't want jazz. You want predictability, certainty, a roadmap. He hasn't given that to anybody yet, except in his own mind.
So you're from West Virginia, right?
I don't know what you were going to say there, but I resent it in advance.
Only respect, my man. But to Dan's point, I think there's a question here of how do you make the argument simultaneously of this is free trade deals, but we're going to bring back a manufacturing renaissance?
It may be that these people are politicians and you shouldn't put too much stock in the words that they say. It may be that this is, all of the Republicans who complained about Karine Jean-Pierre, like, how can she get up there and lie and say, what do you think these people do? They're trying to get or keep power. They're trying to deal with political crises. So they just say stuff. And this administration, more than any other, just says stuff. I will say that the removal of negative stimuli is itself a positive stimuli. If you stop beating a dog, it feels like a positive stimuli. And if I'm feeding you a Limburger cheese sandwich with Bermuda onions, right, and I take off the Limburger and now I'm just feeding you a Bermuda onion sandwich, you're like, this is not bad. And that's what Trump
So to your point, crude oil prices dropped from 69 to 62 over the last week, but it got as low as 57, if you want to show that. 30-year mortgage rates spiked because the 10-year Treasury note just kept climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. Mick, the stock market, I think the S&P 500 is still down like 5% over the last 5 days or so.
Yeah.
Set all of that aside for a second, because that happened, right? Yeah. And now you deal with it going forward. Where does this go next?
Look, the president has the right to change his mind. We just do, right? In fact, sometimes it's a really good idea to change your mind. The difficulty they've got moving forward from now is credibility. When Scott Bessent goes to the microphones next time and says, this is the plan, are they going to say, was that really the plan, or is there a secret plan like last time when you didn't tell us about it? And I think that's an issue they're going to have to deal with, mostly in the building behind us. Because right now, the leadership of both the House and the Senate in both parties is wondering, when Scott Bessent comes down to talk to me, or Howard Lutnick comes down to talk to us, are they really delivering the message of the president, or do I need to deal with the president directly in order to know what's actually going on? And that's a problem for any White House.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Heck yeah.
All right, still to come. Other sides. Speaking of heck yeah, with everything going on in the world right now, did the world's biggest banker just offer a little glimmer of hope? I'll explain. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, the former governor, Chris Sununu, and the former mayor, Bill de Blasio, join Elizabeth, 7 o'clock Eastern, 8 minutes away, right here on News Nation. My take, Other Side.
This is News Nation, ranked least biased among news channels. That's why we're America's fastest growing cable news network. Go to joinnn.com to see for yourself.
All right, one of the best days of the year is almost upon us as the 2025 Masters starts first thing tomorrow morning at Augusta National. And the Masters, trust me when I tell you, is a world of its own. The food at the tournament is unfazed, by the way. by inflation. And it's basically, I'd bet, the cheapest in all of sports. For example, look at some of this year's concessions prices. An egg salad or a pimento cheese sandwich will cost you all of $1.50. It's the 23rd consecutive year the pimento sandwich has cost that price. Other sandwiches, about $3. Beverages range from $2 to $6. Not a bad price to crack a cold one. Now, this isn't the full concession menu, but if you wanted to buy everything on it, it would only cost, and I say only in sports terms, $77. How about that? All right, time for my take now. There are few people in this world who have the type of lens for which to look at the global economic landscape than the country's biggest banker, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Now that this full-blown trade war with China has resumed, I wanted you to hear what Dimon had to say, in part, earlier today.
To me, China isn't, if you look at us, 85,000 GDP, theirs is 15. We have all the food, water, and energy we need. They import 10 million barrels of oil a day. They're surrounded. They have a very complex geopolitical neighborhood. Philippines, Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Pakistan, India, Russia. And they're kind of angry, some of those folks, too.
Not just a reminder of some of the many challenges that China faces, but Dimon would also speak to our country's advantages and offered this dose of hope.
We have peace with Mexico and Canada. We're kind of blessed. We're blessed with the gifts of God and the gifts of the founding fathers. And so we should just get our own act together and we'll be fine.
Now, while there's history from 2018 and 2019 between the U.S. and China during that trade war, no one, and I mean no one, knows what will happen for the rest of 2025 or however long it plays out again. But Dimon's characterization of what elevates the U.S. above the rest of the world is a reminder of where we are tonight. And that's my take. I thank you for watching us here on the Hill on what has been an absolutely fascinating day. A huge turn of events over at the White House. The president with a big decision on tariffs. And right now in the House of Representatives, they are, some Republicans at least, trying to figure out amongst themselves what to do about that so-called one big beautiful bill. A vote expected at any moment now. I'm Blake Berman.